Hello and welcome to the 359th episode of the Crate and Crowbar, a podcast about PC gaming. It is on the time that and the date on which that we are recording this, the 24th of February 2021. I am Alex Wiltshire, and tonight I'm joined by inexorable watcher of the weeping wall, Graham Smith.
Hello.
And errant keeper of the infinite egg, Tom Senior.
Hello, I have started using scissors to cut pizza slices and I'm never going back. Come at me, internet.
You can't do that. That's not what scissors are for. Scissors aren't for food.
No,
you'll get box on them.
I assume you're going for a thin crust though, aren't you?
Thin and crispy, delicious, but it works equally as well for a deep pan.
How big are your scissors?
Do not judge me. They're perfectly normal size, normal scissors. Do not judge me until you've stood in my shoes in a stationary position cutting a pizza with scissors. Then you could judge.
Let's make it a project.
Yeah.
Everybody listening, please have a pizza within the next week.
That's right.
Cut it with scissors and let us know at, what is our email address? Crate and Crowbar
At gmail.com.
At gmail.com. Let us know how you got on. We want to know. I want to know whether Tom Senior is right.
I don't want to know.
He's morally wrong. He's morally.
Looking forward to feedback on that one. Anyway, video games.
There was some news that just came along.
Sad news for me, actually.
Sad news. But rather inevitable all at the same time.
Yeah, it does feel strangely inevitable. Anthem is dead. It died a long time ago, to be honest, didn't it? But there's always the sort of like the lurking promise that EA could like put loads of money into it and get Bio back on it, really like revamp it and take what was really fun about it, which was basically jetpacks and robots, and kind of build a game that worked. And that is no more. They made the decision just to kill it, and I believe it's the COVID what did it. Is that right?
COVID was brought up, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Can't help. I'm not sure.
Which seems, I do think there's a little unfair to COVID, to be honest, because
deep, substantial systems problems with the game, which I got very angry about when we actually covered it when Anthem first came out on this podcast, and it just needed a complete rebuild, like the loot system, everything. The only thing that was fun about it was the moment you launched yourself off a ledge and then flew around a bit. The rest just didn't work.
It's nuts that they spent a year and a half saying, no, we're revamping it, we're still working on it, we've got big plans, we've got an update, it's going to happen, and then just no. Like, I wonder how many people were ever working on it at one time, and how far those revamp plans actually got, whether it was 4 people just coming up with pitches for it and not getting anywhere, or whether it ever actually entered into a serious production cycle.
And it'd be very sad if it had entered that kind of a cycle, because that would be, I mean, it's a huge job, what was required and basically what was what was they led to believe that was happening to it. When in terms of the updates, did you experience many of the improvements that were made and actually released, Tom?
So I sort of tracked it. I didn't get to do the sort of raid type stuff that they teased. But honestly, like the deep problems like the loading times, the fact that you're in 3 open world areas with some world events and hardly much to do, hardly any dungeons, and the fact that it was sort of like pitched as a Destiny-style living game, but there's no way that they could, have the cadence of releases required to be a Warframe or to be a Destiny. And just like a load of just promises that kept being pushed back, and fundamentally just a kind of a class system that didn't make for fun co-op. It was like a combo system, which is actually, you find in Mass Effect 3 multiplayer, and it's actually quite fun. And they kind of seem to have tried to transpose it onto this open world type game, and it just didn't work. And I remember reading some of the kind of post-mortem stuff from like Jason Schreier and other journalists, and there's this phrase "find the fun," which you hear like a Blizzard say this as well. Find the fun only goes so far when you're spending millions of dollars on hundreds of employees trying to make a game. Like, you probably should have found the fun before, like much earlier in the sequence.
There was the fun that was meant to have found them.
Well, it didn't. Of all the attempts I've seen to make like MMOs and living games, this is like the deadest living game I've ever played or tried to follow. It was a real shame because there's loads of great talent at BioWare for writing dialogue. They were just really good cutscenes with great motion capture. It looked gorgeous at points when it wasn't kind of like the frame rate wasn't crashing. And it had like lovely customization of your mech suit. There's just loads of really nice stuff about it that like audio visually, and loads of great artists, really talented concept artists have obviously worked on it. And yeah, it's just, I don't know. This is just like it's a perennial games industry thing where like so many people put so much effort in and nothing comes out of it at the end. It's just quite depressing, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, and actually, to have heard them say that they were going to be, doubling down on all their promises and really revamping it, that would have been a strange decision now because so much time has gone. I don't think that Anthem, even if it had been shored up, or would be shored up in 6 months, a year time from now. This is an old game now. It would never. That would be a bad business decision because you can't see it ever re-attracting a player base that's sort of worthy.
It's weird because I kind of draw parallels between this and Final Fantasy XIV, which I reviewed when it came out and stupidly said in the final paragraph that it would never be fixed because it was so broken. Then 5 years later, they literally rebooted the entire universe, blew up the old universe, and relaunched Final Fantasy XIV, and now it's one of the best MMOs in the world. Like, it's just...
Yeah, that's actually a very good refuting of what I just said. Yeah. No, that's a really good point.
They told me right off. They proved me well wrong, and I was very happy to be wrong because I've really enjoyed Final Fantasy XIV. I've got friends who absolutely love it more than World of Warcraft or any other MMO they've ever played. Apparently it's got really good Final Fantasy storylines, but it did have the Final Fantasy name to kind of fall back on when it did relaunch. Yeah. And that's something that Anthem doesn't have, even with EA's huge marketing budget. And it was marketed super intensively marketed as lots of new EA IP would be. But without Final Fantasy or something like some bedrock like that, maybe, I don't know, maybe you just don't have the momentum to leave it fallow for 4 years and then suddenly pop out with Anthem renewed or whatever.
Yeah, Final Fantasy XIV didn't just have the Final Fantasy name; they also had a prior Final Fantasy MMO. So a lot of those players just went back to playing Final Fantasy XI or whatever, and which is still quite popular today. I think it's still going. And then came back around later. Whereas, like any other game that's turned it around after a rocky start, like say Rainbow Six Siege, for example, that came out to really quite poor or middling reviews and a really bad response from the audience, and its player base was diminishing pretty rapidly and got quite small if you look at the numbers on Steam. They were having regular small updates that turned it around over time rather than going dark for a period of 1 or 2 or 3 years and then coming out with one big update. It was... No, we're going to release lots of little changes and it's still going to suck for a long time. But eventually they'll add up and you'll continue to hear about it constantly because we're working on it constantly and releasing the stuff we're working on.
Yeah, you can be assured. Yeah, you sort of feel that that it's a live thing.
Yeah.
There was never I never felt very confident that that there was that active work going on with Anthem.
Yeah, those games need a heartbeat, don't they? It reminds me of Warframe, which when it came out, I played it the first sort of builds of it and it's pretty bad. Not a very good game. It's like, wow, this is just going to sink. But it didn't, because they just kept on adding new Warframes every few months, and then a new level, then a new kind of tile set, and then new guns. And now it's just a kind of crazed montage of different ideas, and it's unlike anything else in games. And that's just by sort of bolting bits onto this thing over the course of many years consistently, and talking to their players a lot. That's become a huge success.
There's another relevant thing here, and we weren't going to talk about this, but Old School RuneScape launched on Steam today.
Yeah.
Which was like launched because RuneScape, it's just called RuneScape, is commonly thought of as RuneScape 3, and it's kind of a World of Warcraft situation where the game changed so much that people wanted what they'd been playing when they originally got into RuneScape when they were 13 years old, and so they launched Old School RuneScape, I think in like 2013, and then have continued to add to it and develop it as a completely separate game. They haven't done the Blizzard thing of just gradually relaunching expansions in the same order they did 10, 15 years ago. They've just developed it as if it's completely own thing. And so it's got a big player base. In fact, I think something like 2019, I think they said, was the biggest year ever for that game.
Yeah.
You know, including all the years when it was massively popular in the early 2000s.
And it was the old school is more popular than the new school, isn't it?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm glad of it though, because that the company is owned by a kind of an asset kind of investment unit, which I don't know. I'm slightly worried about what might happen to them if they didn't keep making bank.
Well, there's lots of lawsuits around that, isn't there? Because they just got bought by a different asset company, and a third Chinese asset company came in and said, "You can't sell them. We own them." so there's now like a legal fight about whether the company that sold Jagex actually had the rights to sell Jagex.
That's frightening.
Yeah, good stuff.
We should also talk, shouldn't we, about the Blizzard news, because it was BlizzCon earlier this week, or the weekend, wasn't it?
It was.
Diablo 3 Resurrection. Oh no, Diablo 2 Resurrection. I only get confused with my numbers because everything that is old is always new again these days. Diablo 2 Resurrection, which looks hecka fun, or at least it's the old game but kind of revamped and looking, actually that's a really nice kind of remaster look to it. 3D, but still jerky and kind of old. That just has that spritey look, which I always liked.
Yep, they. I'm going to preface this by saying, come to RPS like tomorrow or the next day, or by the time this is out, because I've got a lot of write-up to do about this. And one of the things they've done is that they've almost they traced over the original 2D art and then produced 3D models based on that, which is why a lot of the gear is like 1-to-1, looks correct. And actually, they've actually got more art variety in the weapons and the armor, because there was much more variety in the 2D art than there was in the 3D, the sprite art that was actually shown on screen, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? So you'd have a class of knives. You'd have a class of knives, and the knife in the hand of your necromancer would look the same for about, I don't know, maybe like 10, 20 different items. But the inventory art for each of them would be a bit different. So they could actually, it was cheaper to produce the inventory art, but they've actually managed to take the inventory art and produce 3D models based on that. So yeah, it's going to be like, it's really going to be really, really faithful. One of the things that I was very interested to ask them was about like how online works, because famously Diablo 2, you could just cheat the fuck out of it. You could break it down. I had my mate George, and he had a barbarian, and he had a skill that let him dual wield two-handed weapons, one in each hand. And he found just an incredible one, and then he just went to the save files and copied and pasted it, and then he had two of them. And I was like, George, what the hell are you doing? And he taught us all how to do it. And it's like, oh my God, we've hacked the game. So yeah, that meant the loot system was kind of had zero online integrity in any sort of like competitive context. And that's one of the things that really rubbed people up the wrong way with Diablo 3, with it being always online. Is that suddenly there was a kind of, and with having a marketplace, and suddenly, oh no, we've applied free market economics to Diablo loot, whereas previously it had been a kind of just Wild West. You could just get anything if you wanted to, and that was kind of freedom I think people missed with the always online thing. So the good news is that Diablo 2 Resurrected, you'll be able to play that offline. It's going to have co-op, obviously, but it also will have PvP, which was notoriously broken in terms of like there was just no balance at all, which is actually again part of the charm of the game. A lot of the games kind of, what you might look at if you're looking at the game as an online game, you say, oh, we need to balance all this up. But I think with Diablo you just don't have to do that, and that's one of the things that I kind of worry a bit about for Diablo 4, which is also going to be always online like Diablo 3 was. Is actually going to introduce more and more online elements. So that means Blizzard has to really just take go to great lengths to preserve the integrity of the loot system and not allow people to copy and paste great swords that do thousands of damage. So it's going to be an interesting trade-off. It's going to be interesting to see to what extent Diablo II Resurrected cannibalizes Diablo 4. I think that what's going to happen is Diablo II Resurrected will be out years before Diablo 4, and they'll sort of use it as a stepping stone to introduce people to the next chapter of the series. And they're going to have to do that because I think a lot of people would probably play Diablo 2 before Diablo 4. But I can't wait to see how the community reacts to it.
There's a constant discussion at RPS about whether Diablo 2 or Diablo 3 is better, and which one do you recommend to people? Yeah. Like, if you're telling them to go play a game right now in 2021, and the current winner within the team is Diablo 2, is the one that you should still go back to.
When did any of the voters last play Diablo 2? Because I played it within the last year or so, and I didn't play very much of it because it's brutal. Like, I mean, I know that you can kind of mess around with it once you're at high levels, but as a new player to it, a death means being sent a long way back. It's pretty brutal.
There's some really good mods for it, though. I'm trying to. There's one which just basically speeds everything up by about 200%. It makes everything about 10 times as powerful. It's almost like a sort of blitz speedrun version of the game. I'll Google around and try and find the name of this for the show notes, because that's a brilliant thing that you have about Diablo 2 is that you can actually just go into its innards and make it what you want it to be.
Yeah.
But when it comes to action RPGs, this is a bad word, isn't it? Game feel, is that a bad word? I don't know. The way
game feel's good.
Yeah, that's right. Let's use it. All right, game feel then. Hitting a zombie, a 2D sprite hitting a 2D sprite in Diablo 2 doesn't compare to shattering a 3D thing that just jibs across the environment. And I think let's not underestimate the flair and the 3D modern engines can bring to the moment-to-moment violence of that genre. And that's true too of a lot of the other great action RPGs, like even Path of Exile and stuff like that. Actually, Path of Exile is probably the biggest competitor to Diablo 2 Resurrected, I think. And that's an interesting game because it is always online, but it has such a huge loot pool that you wouldn't even want to mess with it. And it's also got gem socketing up your ass, and just so much stuff like that you do to customize your character. And it's free. You only ever pay for cosmetics if you want to like have your crown on fire or something like that. Like everything else is a huge amount of game there. So it's going to be interesting to see how Diablo 2 Resurrected slots into that environment as well, like the good always online action RPG. Yeah, it's going to be good. I mean, I'll play both to death, no doubt. I'll be a skeleton at the end. Just be me.
You got to play Diablo while you're riding on your Peloton bike.
That's oh my god.
There's money to be made there.
Oh, that's a good idea, actually. And so it's also Diablo Immortals, which is going to be the mobile version, which I'm kind of curious about as well, because
it got a terrible reception when it was very, very, very first shown, and that was like quite a long time ago. But I didn't really see why there was much upset about it.
Well, I think it's because it was a bit like
because everyone just wanted Diablo 4 at the time.
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
And it's like when Valve announced the card game Artifact. Yeah. And there's like, there's a new Dota thing, and everyone's like, whoa, what could it be? Could it be like Dota 2.0, 3.0? And then it's like, it's a collectible card game, and it's really complicated. And there's quite unfortunate footage, like when they revealed it, I think at the International, and the whole crowd just goes, boo! Just brutally crawl about it. That was a good game. That's another game that's gone away that I'm looking forward to seeing how Valve rebuilds that as well. Lots of chat about dead and Phoenix games that are rising from the ashes today.
Well, there's another one. Another one. Days Gone, which is so Sony has recommitted or continued its commitment to releasing games on PC, PlayStation games on PC, and Days Gone, which is a PlayStation 4 game about an angry man on a motorcycle making friends with zombies. has been announced that it's coming to PC, which is another dead game about dead things. I'm not remotely interested in Days Gone and never was, but I'm definitely into the idea of Sony, this platform holder, being very, very happy just to release its games on PC simply because apparently for them it isn't much of a hassle. And so why the heck not? Get the extra money. The PC owners are going to pay for those games. That's nice.
Yeah.
Get Shadow of the Colossus out there. Get all their first party games. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, this is off the back of Horizon Zero Dawn coming to PC last year, and Sony saying they felt that was a success. It sold well. There wasn't a huge adverse reaction from Sony fans that this previously exclusive game was coming to PC. But yeah, Days Gone doesn't seem very interesting. I'd like the Spider-Man game, please. I want to swing around a big city.
Right.
I like that game. It's good.
But that would be, I mean, you mentioned Shadow of the Colossus, Tom. Like, would they ever do a game like that, which is just so PlayStation-y? Is that where does this concept go for Sony? Would they ever take things that have become associated with the brand as opposed to, because Zero Horizon Dawn is a very good 3D game. Like it was a totally exclusive to PlayStation until that surprise announcement that it was coming to PC. But I wouldn't have said that's an archetypal PS4 game, PlayStation game. But when you bring those iconic ones, Shadow of the Colossus. What are the other ones?
I was going to say, what are the other ones? Other than
Ico and Last Guardian,
other than those three, which are made by the same team, what are the other actually iconic or inseparable from?
They've kind of shied away from them, haven't they?
Well, what I think, all of those games would have sort of reputation of indie darlings on PC. I think they'd fit right in to PC gaming, all of them. I think there'd be huge curiosity. And it's also a great way of preserving a game like Ico, and also opening up to modders who could do whatever they wanted with it. They'd right away. And also, there's been so many kind of articles and kind of investigations and community effort with Shadow of the Colossus to find secrets, because that world is so open and enticing, but also so empty that people think there must be secrets in there somewhere. And that PC gamers are just going to tear that apart, go into the maps, go to every corner of the world, and find any secrets that might be there.
They'll ruin it.
Well, yeah, it's old though, isn't it? If it's old, you can ruin it. That's the rule.
So, I mean, obviously, the kind of like the grand hope is Bloodborne. I mean, that's
yeah.
And I'm going to stand. I'm going to sit here, and I'm going to say, I reckon Bloodborne will be on PC within the next year and a half.
Or listeners,
it's been said.
Note that it's been said. I'd love that. Also, I think genuinely, the performance is a bit spotty on PS4,
right?
And I think that as a combat game, I love it. But I think just at 60 frames, it'll be really, really good. It'll be even better.
Designed.
Exactly. And look at Sekiro. Oh, it's so good on PC. It's just. I'm not normally a frame rate wanker, but for these games, I think it really does improve. The way the game feels and how responsive it is in a combat situation, I think is essential to the quality of the game. So I think
totally agree.
That'd be lovely.
I don't think it's going to happen. Not in that timeline, anyway. One of the things Jim Ryan talked about was they see this as a way of growing the audience for the game. So they did Zero Dawn because they've got a new Horizon game coming out, and this is a bunch of new people that have played the first that might consider the buying the sequel. So I think the next game you'll get after Days Gone will be like God of War, ahead of the release of the sequel and that sort of stuff.
That makes sense.
Oh, Big Daddy Sensible speaks again.
No, that's true. I did enjoy God of War though. I really enjoyed it.
Love hacking those skeletons up, don't you?
What is it about skeletons, Tom?
I mean, hurrah for skeleton. I will always love a good skeleton and the noise they make when you bash them. Though I did get into trouble on Twitter. I got owned on Twitter when I I was celebrating the fact that Kratos could use his amazing axe that returns to his hand. Fantastically designed game mechanic, which feels amazing. But you could use it to just like eviscerate seagulls that were just in the environment, and they would just like literally explode when they there was a bespoke animation for hitting them with the axe from afar. And then I got a tweet from someone who was just like, actually, seagulls have been driven from their natural habitat on the coasts, and that's why they're everywhere. And they're not actually scum. They're just like, please have some empathy for these people. And I was like, no. What's a homing axe for if I can't throw it at a distant seagull and watch them?
But you're meant to do it at the crows, though, aren't you? So
yeah,
why
that
not
too,
the
them
screenshot?
too. But you know, it's because Bath is played by seagulls, so it's a kind of quite cathartic revenge fantasy. In addition to the deep Norse mythology that they're trying to evoke.
Yes, for everyone else, it was a dad adventure. For you,
it was like seagull revenge. That's right. Let's clean this place out. Don't at me. I'll get so many tweets. I'm enjoying Twitter these days. Good. Oh, how did I get onto that?
What have you been playing, Graham?
I've been playing Voyage, which I'd never heard of until it came out on Steam this past week. But Voyage is a 1 or 2 player game in which you push right for a long time and walk through an exceptionally pretty series of landscapes. It's got some very light puzzling in it, and that there is like, I mean, when I say light puzzling, I mean light puzzling. Like there is usually in any given area there will be a handful of interactive objects, and usually it's either a block you can push or pull, maybe to put it into position so you can climb to a higher platform. Sometimes there's just some buttons, and you just have to press all 4 buttons in the environment in order to progress, and that's it. But the idea is that, you know, if you were doing this cooperatively, you know, when you climb up a block, maybe you've got to punt up your co-op partner and then they've got to reach down and hoist you up. I didn't play it cooperatively. I just played it on my lonesome, in which case it's just like the AI you're working with. And so in terms of like your interaction with it, and I don't have a problem with games that are light in terms of interaction, but this is a bit monotonous. But it's only 2 hours long and it's fucking gorgeous, basically. It's it's telling a wordless story. I mean, so that was the first kick. The interaction is a bit monotonous. That was the first kick. My second kick is that it feels like it's turned up 2 hours late after the end of the journey party, and that this, like, you're kind of walking through sort of abandoned landscapes, looking at runes carved into the walls to try and work out what the story is. And I'll be honest,
who were these ancient people?
Yeah.
And why did they carve geometric signs into these walls?
Yeah.
Only John Blow knows.
And like, yeah, I don't think that's a particularly strong way to engage me in a story. And I played this 2 hour long game. Couldn't really fucking tell you what the story is for the vast majority of it. It has a sort of feeling though, like it's kind of like Limbo or Inside for Care Bears or Studio Ghibli fans or Moomin fans, because it is like that pushing right, sort of weighty, platformy movement as you're sliding down hills and climbing up things. But each environment, as well as just being really pretty to look at, is very atmospheric. Filled with little creatures and little spirit men that are wandering through forests while raindrops pitter-patter across a rippling lake. Strange ghost-like boatmen that will help you sail across lakes. And the music in it is gorgeous as well. It's by a guy called Callum Bowen, who released music under the name Bowen, and he does really great upbeat gamey theme music for like stuff like Piku Niku, that fun over the top platform game from a couple of years ago. And his music in this is really great as well, and it's so striking. Some of the visuals, there's a point in it in which you are exploring a spaceship, but the spaceship is just bright bubblegum pink. Like all the insides of it and the halls of it. The palette in the game is great. Like you're going through across a series of different alien planets or different locations on a single alien planet. I'm not actually sure. But the color usage in those different scenes and these different landscapes is really interesting. And
it's really restrained palette, isn't it? It's just a few colors, and they are choices you would never have thought would work together as beautifully as they do.
Yeah, like that kind of, like you'll be in that kind of rainy, watery forest scene, but then there'll just be like a daub of purple on a hillside in the background in a way that shouldn't work but absolutely does, because all the environments are hand painted and all the animation is obviously hand drawn and stuff like that as well. So it took me about, I would say, probably a little bit under 2 hours to complete. I think it's like £10 or £15, and I'd have problems with it, but I would absolutely recommend it to anyone. And like you, Alex, I know you played a bit of it. Do you feel similarly?
Yeah, very similarly. Although I'm it's very simple, but I got stuck twice. I'm currently stuck trying to push a box, and it won't go any further, and I don't know what stopped it. And I can't go. Something's blocking, and I just can't walk any further. It might be a bug, but it's odd. I didn't. This is you mentioned that it's sort of dialogueless. There is nothing to tell you how it works, like nothing to even tell you what the buttons do. It's quite generous with the control schemes. You can play it purely with your mouse, with the keyboard, and I believe there's some gamepad support as well, which I haven't used. But I found it totally inscrutable at the start because you're in this room, and I just didn't know what to do. You press one button, and it kind of a chime starts, and then other things on the screen also chime. Another one is interact, but you've kind of got to hold it down in the right place with your character in the right place for it to work. There's also a kind of you didn't realize what one of the buttons was, but I latterly did, which is you can, when you're playing on your own as opposed to with another player in co-op, you can get the AI character to stop. You can get them to stay where they are. I managed to walk off with my 2 characters into the darkness, not knowing what to do on the very first screen, and the game lets you just keep walking into the darkness. I went for nearly a minute thinking, what's going to happen? During that journey, I'd obviously pressed the button that disengaged, sort of unjoined my characters, walked back into the light with what it turned out to be one character, and then had to switch to the other one. That's what the 4th button does. Switches your kind of the character that you're controlling to the other one, and then had to walk a minute again back into the light with the other character. But yeah, like you, Graham, I thought that the visuals are just plenty to keep me playing. I do want to finish it because it's short, and yeah, it is stunning.
I that button that separates your 2 characters, I thought that was just that you could do hand signals to your co-op partner. So like if you were like playing with a co-op partner and you wanted to signal to them, hey, look at this or go there or something like that, that was what that button did. Because when you press it, your character holds up a hand or like points. Yeah. I didn't realize at that point that it was telling the other the AI person, stop now and never move ever again. I'm abandoning you on this planet. So long. And that thing where you can walk off into the darkness for a really long time and it doesn't stop you. There are other points in the game where you basically do have to do that, where you're walking through an environment and it will either the screen will be covered in white and it'll be completely white. You can't see anything because you're walking through like a cloud or something like that, or it's just completely dark for a moment and you have to keep pushing for a surprisingly long time before you'll re-emerge. And it kind of works, but it is obviously, it's kind of training you to do a thing that in other instances, no, that's not what you should do. Actually, you should have been pushing that big stone over there that in no way looks like it can be pushed.
I noticed it was first shown off on TigSource way back in 2019, which would make it in development for at least 5 years. coming to 6 years at the very least.
2019, you said.
No, 2015. 2015. Did I say I'd previously said 2019? Yeah, no, 2015, and and the screenshots that they shared were like almost identical of that area with the murals that you've got to light up. That sort of beautifully, like with the patter of rain and things.
Yeah.
After when you're going on the boat, and it looked pretty much the same. Like it might be they had to leave it and come back to it because I think it's made by two brothers.
Yeah, I didn't know they were brothers, but yeah, it's just by two people, and other than the musician. Yeah, I hope it does well for them though, because I'd love for them to do more stuff. Basically, like these kinds of projects, I imagine are hard to make, hard to get funding for, hard to finish. But it looks so incredible that I hope they get to do more stuff together.
Yeah, definitely.
What have you been playing, Alex?
I'm sorry to say that I've been playing on my Mister a bit more. Although actually, I'm going to talk about a game that isn't on Mister. But I'm going to talk about the journey I took to get to the game. The Mister is this. I've been banging on about it too much, and I really won't talk about it for too long. But it's this emulation, basically, box that was sort of just plays old stuff very, very nicely. You can refer to our older podcasts for more on that. But on there, I've been playing old shooters. I never really played scrolling shooters very much, like shoot 'em up shops, very much in the past. And I've sort of taken it on to kind of just get more familiar with them. So I've been playing stuff like Celeste on kind of NES and Super Nintendo. I've been playing lots of TurboGrafx or PC Engine shooters, like Blazing Lasers and Spriggan and stuff like that, and really enjoying the kind of the breadth of expression in this kind of like a genre which is very defined, and kind of enjoying the fact that there are these very different flavors. I kind of noticed there are sort of 3 different kinds of flavors of shooters. They're kind of like these Gradius style, quite precise shooters, which are about taking tactical, playing carefully, but taking quite tactical decisions over how you play. Because in that one, your power-ups, they come along, but then you invest the power-ups very specifically into certain they kind of act as a currency to kind of buy a laser or a missile shooting out, or extra speed and things like that, which may or may not be appropriate to the level you're playing on. So you kind of, good choices are what that game is about, quite precise. And then there are these games like Total Excess, where these power-ups come and, you're kind of discovering sort of these incredible combinations of screen filling kind of lasers and branching out of you and homing missiles coming out of you, and there are enemies coming down at you, and the whole screen is alight with explosions, and you're kind of dodging through stuff, and it's just this excess kind of going on. And part of the game is when you've found a nice kind of conjunction of power-ups, you kind of try to avoid any other power-ups which will cancel out what you've got for something else. Things that, Celeste is a bit like that, and Blazing Lasers, they're really fun sort of things. Another of the games that are on there is the arcade version of Dodonpachi, which is a cave shooter that came out at the end of the 90s. And this game was one of the early what's called bullet hells. They're about these great flowering patterns of pink bullets just spreading out all over the screen, and your ship has a fabulously small hitbox, but it's still very easy to get hit. And kind of your job is to get through these kind of patterns, but also you're not really picking up power-ups particularly. You've got more or less one shot type, which will generally upgrade over time. And that is the game that I've been playing on PC, which is a game that came out a couple of years after Dodonpachi by the same developer, Cave, called Mushihimesama, which is it's it's about beetles and stuff. So rather than spaceships and kind of helicopters and blowing stuff up, this is about blowing chitin off and watching kind of ichor explode, where like Dodonpachi is oranges and yellows and reds of explosions and sort of fire and all that kind of thing. Mushihimesama is about purples and greens and things like that, and the screen just fills up with these kind of just ichor. Basically, it's just so good. So yeah, this is a bullet hell game, scrolling shooter, vertical shooter, and I'm trying to get good at it. And I got a high score yesterday. I managed to make I'm really bad at all these games still, but I managed to get on a single credit through to into midway through the third level, which is good for me. That's a cool 2 million points that I got from that. This is trash compared to anybody who's any good at the game. Like, you watch people playing who are good at it, and it's just absurdly. Well, actually, I was about to say that they're absurdly skilled, which they totally are, but it can be really hard to tell in these games because you watch a good player play, and you can't. They kind of languidly sweep from one side of the screen to the other, and one back and forth, and you do see them dodging bullets carefully. You can see these moments of incredible precision as they're kind of dancing between these patterns of kind of usually boss bullets. But the rest of the time, it looks like they're just going from one side of the screen to the other. And I actually got a playthrough, and this is actually on Dodonpachi. I got a playthrough of the first level and tried to take on there's like a 4-hour playthrough because they kept stopping the video and explaining what they're doing. It's totally fascinating to me. But they would explain that they're going from one side to the other. And I tried doing that as impossible. I just could not do it and achieve what they were doing, which is essentially chaining hits. Dodonpachi is very much about, to get high scores, is very much about keeping a chain of hits. You've got to just keep hitting enemy things in order to keep this massive score bonus that you'll build over time. If you stop hitting stuff for more than about a second, you'll just lose your bonus completely. And the levels are designed such that you can just about keep this bonus going for most of the level. I think there are maybe 2 or 3 breakpoints that you can't avoid, but the rest of the time they're able to chain stuff together. I could not do this at all. I could not move from left to right and back again while also hitting stuff. There are these kind of subtleties of not only movement but also firing. These both Mushihimesama and Dodonpachi have the same control system, which is 3 buttons. One button is shooting all of your kind of machine gunny kind of bullets up the screen in a kind of wide pattern, and you press it once, and your one kind of salvo will blow out. The middle one is you hold it down and you'll concentrate your fire. Actually, no, the middle one, sorry, is bomb. I'll come back to bomb in a sec. And the third button is you hold it down and a concentrated gout of beam will come out of the front of your thing and go straight up the screen. And that usually penetrates enemies and is the most dangerous, most damaging bullet. But it will usually slow you down. It will slow your ship down, so you're less able to move sort of quickly to avoid hits. You play it by essentially holding down the beam, but then holding down the kind of like the normal fire button to move quicker. That's kind of the way I've kind of started using it. The bomb, meanwhile, isn't really for damaging enemies. I mean, it does damage enemies, it does wipe out stuff, but mostly it cancels bullets. That's what it's for. It's like this get out of jail kind of card. And nobody who is any good at the game ever uses their bomb because in Dodonpachi it will instantly clear your entire bonus. Mushihimesama is a bit more, a bit kinder than that. It'll just reduce the bonus. But and that is it. But like, just the intricacy of the game is just extraordinary, and the ability for people to find routes through this, what looks like this just insane kind of totally arbitrary barrage of enemies coming at you. It has been designed with total intention, and people find it, and learning it and getting to know to play it, I found it's mesmerizing and one more go-y. And it helps that the game feel, as you put it, Tom, is just beautiful. Like the sound effects and the ichor and just the way things explode. It's just incredibly satisfying just to blow shit up. One of the third level on Mushihimesama starts out normally, but soon you'll find yourself flying above some enormous insect which has multiple eyes just all over its carapace, and they're just sightlessly, kind of more unfocusedly, just staring up at you. And for all of this part of the level, you're just blowing the mother living fuck out of its kind of carapace, steadily working your way up. And the whole screen is just filled with either bits of huge chunks of carapace kind of blowing up, other chunks of carapace taking damage and therefore flashing. You've got enemies flying around all the place. There are these bright pink bullets sailing towards you in these beautiful parabolas. Like, holy fuck. Like, I've got so much respect for that game. I'll never be good at it. But I'm really enjoying getting to know it and just appreciating this vast genre of what looks from the outside really samey. Like, mechanically, Mushihimesama is very similar to Dononpachi and very similar to a lot of other bullet hell games. I love the tiny differences. They're crafted so beautifully. Yeah, it's been really nice.
I always really, I love hearing about these games and I love reading about these games, but whenever I try to play them, I find the shooting really satisfying, the explosions really impressive, and then I die. And I'm like, okay, now I'll try 2 or 3 or 4 more times, and I will die so quickly each time that I find my enthusiasm wanes quite quickly. Do you think you need to be a particular type of person in order to enjoy these games? Like, do you think it's a mindset thing that you just need to have that urge to better your score, urge to beat the system and like improve and overcome that hardship?
Yeah, yes, I do. I think it's about going in with it's definitely going in with an intention helps a lot. Like, I've definitely been you until now about shooters. I think that one thing that I've made myself do, I think the killer to these games for me has always been, because these are arcade games, they were designed for the arcade, and therefore when they're made free play, when you buy it on Steam, you'll start the game, you'll kind of go through your first credit, you'll die 3 times, and you'll continue. And from that point, and you'll continue, you'll beat level 1. You'll then be on, by this point, you'll have kind of continued 15 times, 10 times. You'll go into level 2, you'll continue another 15 times, level 3, and you'll just die and die and die and die, but you'll continue going because the continue system just allows you to continue, from that point that you died. And it feels pointless. Like, you're seeing the same thing. You're not appreciating any art in the way the levels kind of work and how they've been designed, because you're just blasting and then dying. I forced myself to not continue. Like, I did do a full run at the start and felt that same weightless kind of point. Just felt a bit dirty having done it. I'm forcing myself just to play 1 credit, and that concentrates my mind in the way that when you force yourself to do a challenge in most games, suddenly shit's got real and it's become a bit more interesting. The reward of doing less is actually greater than if I'd gotten to the end of the game but continued, as many times as it took to do that. I think that has definitely helped me. I think that for I mean, I can only speak for myself here. Like, I've come into this with an understanding of where this game came from. So I'm just inherently kind of slightly academically interested in it as well. I'm interested in why do people like it? It obviously works for people. So why does, sort of, what do they see in it? So I'm kind of forcing myself a little bit, but not very much. I think the last thing is, and I don't have a last thing. That was it.
They were good things. I don't think you need any more things.
I'm not a very competitive person, and I know that, and I think that I had a good go, and then I listened and watched a few things about people talking about it and watching them play and thinking, oh God, the skill ceiling is really high. I'm not going to be able to do that, but I'm going to be satisfied with just getting a bit better. And, just playing it on my own terms. I'm not particularly competitive, as I said. So I'm not particularly score attacky, but it is nice to feel that my score is going up. I mean, your score goes up for two different reasons. Like, one, your score goes up further if you survive for longer, but your score will go up higher if you try to chain better. So you can actually set yourself the personal challenge of simply, I don't need to have, not died on the first stage, but if I can chain up until that point, I'll be succeed. And it helps actually. The Mushihimesama has a really nice score display thing where it will show you the high score from the stage that you're on, as well as the high score overall. So you can see how your current run is comparing against your best run on that particular stage, which is good as well.
The continue thing is a really good tip, because like Spelunky was a thing I got into because of the daily challenge, because it gave it stakes. And oftentimes I enjoyed Spelunky best when I would just do the daily challenge and then stop for the day. I think like these are games I would probably enjoy more if I didn't think, oh, I'm gonna play this game now for 2 hours. If I instead thought, I'm gonna play this game for 10 minutes and then imagine that I've run out of quarters or whatever, and I'll come back on my commute home tomorrow and play another 10 minutes, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I don't think this is a game that, I mean, I'm sure there are people people who are generally very good at it that can sit down for hours and play it. I've been playing it in 20-minute bursts and then come back 20 minutes. It's not a demanding game in the sense that it takes lots of time. So you can just have a bash and then leave it.
I'm going to try it and probably give up, but I'll try it. And it sounds cool.
Tempted to bang on about Ikaruga again, which I actually mentioned last week or the week before. Another amazing game which has like deep layers of skill to it, even though it has like such a beautifully basic rule set, which is that there are light bullets, there are dark bullets, and your ship could be light polarity or dark polarity. And if you're a dark polarity, you absorb dark bullets. If you're light polarity, you absorb light bullets. And that's it. That's pretty much it. You do double damage to enemies of the opposite polarity. And the chain system is about killing things in sequences of 3, multiples of 3. So you could kill 9 white enemies, then 3 black enemies, then 6 white enemies, and then 12 white enemies. And that chain will keep building and building. But if you clear certain rounds quickly enough, you actually extra waves will spawn. So there are hidden secret little bits that you can sort of pull into the game. The more efficient you are. And I'd recommend anyone just watching not pro, but I mean just amazing, incredible runs of Ikaruga, because it's an absolutely beautiful game as well. Like these games are psychedelic.
It's gorgeous still, yeah. So I totally forgot about it, because I did play Ikaruga when it came out on GameCube in the
that's horrible
2000s, whatever it was, and I could fully chain the first stage. I could get to the end of the first stage and do a complete like 3s and 3s and 3s and 3s. And then it kind of collapsed in the second stage. It wasn't a great chain. Like I would miss out loads of stuff that good players would do. But then I in this spurt of playing shooters, I did try it again on PC. It's a really good port, gorgeous.
It is
really good port, and these moments of that bit. I think it's in the second stage where the ship just flips up towards the camera. Camera then follows them down into this machine with these doors kind of clunking open and then close behind them. Like it's so good. I'm fucking shit at it. Can't do anything that I used to.
Hard. It's really hard. It's because again there are no power-ups. Like all of your abilities are with you at the very start of the game, and
there's nothing. You don't pick up anything at all, do you?
There's nothing. It's such a pure rule set, and you think, oh well, how much harder could it get once you've watched someone do a single player run through of it and just chained everything to death and just beautifully eviscerated every boss? And then what you do is you go onto YouTube and you search for solo co-op runs, which is you play the game co-op. And so it'll probably be like Korea or Japan or somewhere, and you'll see there'll be someone and they'll have like a hand on each stick, and they will play 2 co-op ships, manipulating the entire game and getting just extraordinary scores and never dying. And it's just what give me your brain. Give me your brain. I want the kind of like the brain that will be able to handle all of that information. So it's spectacular. Even if you never buy the game, it's well worth watching that stuff because it's so good. Ikaruga is at its most horrendous. It traps you inside machines that spin around you and shut you in, and you're dodging and changing your polarity all the time as you're moving through these structures and like punching through bits of them to eventually escape and get a really big slow motion explosion. It's extraordinary. Great game.
What you been playing this week though, Tom?
Oh, I've been playing Lair of the Clockwork God from Size 5 Games, formerly Zombie Cow Games, I think.
Yeah. This
is the third in the series. So it started with Ben There, Dan That, which I think was a free adventure game and still is free. And it was followed by Time, Gentlemen, Please. And these are both they're both very good adventure games in their own right, but also had a very particular kind of I'm going to say postmodern. Let's do it. Let's get into it. So it's a very aware of games, and it really rewards people who have played a lot of games, lots of in-jokes. It's also like to try to deconstruct a lot of the kind of conventions of the genres that it's trying to it's actually you're playing through. And what's cool about Lair of the Clockwork God is that you've got Ben and you've got Dan. You can switch between them. And Ben is an adventurer who refuses to even hop up the smallest step. He refuses to push a single crate or a single box, but he will combine anything with anything for very silly reasons as the adventurer of the party. And then you've got Dan, who's this kind of small, kind of simian, big-handed, fast Mario boy who runs everywhere and jumps and double jumps, and he's the platformer, but he refuses to even flip a switch, and he moves really quickly. But then you switch back to Ben, and he walks at an absolute snail's pace as he kind of like observes the environment. And it's I've really enjoyed it recently. It's been on sale recently, which is why I actually finally bought it, because I really enjoyed the Ben and Dan games because they were always like pretty well observed if you're kind of in the club. And I think that is kind of an interesting thing to examine about this type of game, where if you played loads and loads of games and you know all the conventions, then you get loads and loads of jokes. But what I find really positive about Lair of the Clockwork God is that even though there's like cynicism to it and there's a lot of sarcasm and stuff, it's deeply affectionate for the games it's talking about. It really is. Like, so you kind of like you'll be playing as Ben the adventurer, and you'll be in a museum with things on pedestals, and then one of the pedestals is like a cube rotating, and he looks at it and says, "Whoa, I wouldn't even know how to put my hands on that thing." And and you realize, oh, it's a Fez reference. That's lovely. Just a completely pointless little thing in the background that you could choose to look at or not. And it like the references run so deep that if you've played loads of games, it's super rewarding, and it's kind of just a little sort of treasure trove. It's really it's really loving. Like it's kind of an ode to all these games. Even while Ben, the character of Ben is that he's quite sardonic, and you know he's annoyed at the fact that platformers have taken over, and the fact that platformers can be all meaningful now. And there seems to be some like not quite precise digs that Thomas was alone, but that type of thing, which to be honest, I appreciate it greatly. And yeah, it's never mean, and I think that's the thing that I missed about. So they did was it Rise of the Kickman? They did a sort of football parody.
That's right, yeah.
Which I didn't get along with at all, because I just found it to be like, I mean, it's like lots of people love football, and football's great. I love football. There's actually lots to it, and it kind of seems to be mocking. Whereas with this, you get the sense that the writers and everyone who made it completely understands the subject matter so well. They managed to actually kind of take the mick out of stuff, but with a positive sense, and the fact that the cynicism is ring fenced to Ben's character in particular, the adventurer, and he's kind of a bit stuck up. He's a bit he's very old school. That's his whole character. So you could bury all those jokes in that character without it actually seeming like the game is trying to call out other games for being a certain way. And it's very funny. It's you play it for jokes basically. The platform is just like, it's still not bad. It's just perfectly fun. You get a lot of mileage out of switching to Dan the platformer and having like all this really chirpy, upbeat music that's obviously riffing on Sonic, and then switching back to Ben, who's in a purgatory, and he's very, very slowly walking between dead people, talking to them, and stealing their inventories and stuff like that, and combining stupid things with other things. So it's just it's so funny, but so dumb. It's like there's a duct, and he's like, on a particular floor, he's like, what do I do with this duct? And then you get some duct tape, so you roll the duct tape down the duct and something happens. It's just like, yeah, that pretty much is adventure game logic. As much as like the character of Ben is kind of lionizing this old school way of playing games, it's also revealing how absurd it is a lot of the time. And I find it like just really super enjoyable so far. I'm currently on the sort of third section. Essentially what you're doing with these two characters is all the apocalypses are happening at once to London. And so like whether it's like Godzilla or raining fire, earthquakes, just everything is terrible. And there's one, the Clockwork God underground, that could solve all of this. But what you have to do is you have to teach it empathy for all human emotion before it will agree to rescue the species. And so each section of the game is based on an emotion. The first one is joy, which is where you get the Sonic level for your platformer. And I'm currently on the fear level, which is a massive kind of alien and isolation riff as well. And I just can't wait to play with the rest of it and be rewarded for how much I know about games. But obviously the counter to that is like, if you don't have that knowledge and you're kind of not getting all of that, I'm not sure like whether it's actually perhaps worth getting. But I think for maybe a lot of people who would perhaps download a podcast like this, it's a shoo-in. I think it's a good buy.
How does it avoid getting being frustrating, that being continually reminded that your character's kind of one of them is very slow moving, the other one won't do certain things? So
it's very annoying initially, but then this is I don't think it's spoilers. This is the first sort of 20 minutes of the game. Dan the platformer realizes that he could just pick up Ben and run and double jump while having him on his back, and there's a lot of kind of fun and kind of puzzles based around that. And also it's just good for pacing, because being able to switch between them when they're in separate bits is like genuinely just being able to be in control of a fast character that double jumps and has cheerful music, and then switch back to the slightly grumpy adventurer. It's good. I think it's quite nicely done. I have had to go to Google a couple of times for some of the puzzles, but I mean that's to be expected, isn't it, really, with adventure games? The worst genre. Don't at me. It's not the worst genre. I love adventure games.
What does the platforming feel like?
It's quite. That's a good question. I'm trying to figure out how to describe it. Really, there's no sense of momentum to your character, to Dan. There's a sprint button and double jump so far. I imagine there'll be like wall jumps and stuff coming up, but it's very much when you land, you just land still, and when you jump for a specific point, if you run, your jump goes further. It feels nice, but it's not. There's no kind of like nuance or particularly skill to it, I would say. Like in terms of I think it's one of the best platformers force you to overcome momentum or your character's like size or jump height, to require a degree of finesse when controlling them to actually complete puzzles. Whereas in this, if you see a platform, you could probably get to it by just double jumping, and you can be quite sloppy with your button presses there. I think it's deliberately very forgiving in that sense, and this comes from someone who's just completed Ori and the Blind Forest. Ori and the Will of the Wisps, which was a ball ache at points. A very good platform actually, but and a lovely game. But coming back to this, is like, this is just sort of easy mode. It's lovely, and it shouldn't be any more complicated than it is, to be honest, based on what it's tried to say and the fact that if you're switching between these two different styles of play all the time, you don't necessarily have that much time to learn the intricacies of a very developed platforming model. So those bits are deliberately kind of forgiving and almost like breaking free between puzzles so far. So yeah, it's nice. I like it.
It's nice.
It's nice. So that's all I need at the moment. It's nice. So I'll take it. I'll play it. I'll finish it. And it's on sale. I think it's still on sale actually. It's also on PS4. It's also on Switch. I've been playing it on Switch because that's what I do now. In the bath.
I'm glad that this series kind of has continued, because I remember when the first one came out, and because that was kind of, that was in the early days of indie. The very first one came out, wasn't it? And
they were really funny
when nobody was interested in adventure games as well. And there's this kind of kind of sort of plucky, very, very, very British kind of adventure game just appears.
It's still very, very, very British. It's still the same voice basically. Though those early games were like, whoa, the deep cuts in that game. I think like they even put games journalists in the second one, like specific people that you might meet at a press conference. Like, wow, this is kind of a bit weird. Still really, really fun though. And if you like adventure games, you should definitely play the first two. They're really fun. Also, it's just the Ben and Dan kind of personas. It's a Lauren and Hardy kind of team that is just enticing. I enjoy their bants.
Bant is what we have.
That's all we have now. Zoom bants. The least nourishing form of bant there is.
Shall we do questions from questions?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
I've got an email here from Mr. Wendell. Mr. Wendell writes, Dear Creighton Crowbar, Bath Games with Tom Sr. is now my favourite podcast segment. He's failed to do it in this one, unless he's going to pull something out at the end of this one.
I mentioned very, I snuck it in. I was talking the Lair of the Clockwork God I've been playing in the bath on my Switch. So, this week's iteration.
Mr. Wendell says, I imagine that fancy string music that plays in every TV ad, a pearl white bathtub with little golden legs, a beard and bubbles galore. Oh, it's a beautiful sight. Video version, please. Would you?
So we could put a Patreon tier in for those so inclined. But all you're going to see is
£1,000 a week.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot. I mean, I sell my body for a certain amount. You have to respect this. But I could, I've got a beard already, but I could also just use phone to make an even bigger beard, like a Gandalf one. That'd be good. And I could just basically talk to the camera about how good the latest shmup I'm playing on my Switch is, and then I'll drop the Switch in, and then there'll be lightning, and then I'll die, and I'll be a Twitch superstar. Is that what you want? £1,000 a week.
Finally, you will be the skeleton.
Yay, that's what he always wanted.
That's half a skeleton. Yeah, it's not a real possibility, but I will continue to tell people about stuff to play in my bath. But let's also, having consulted the Crowbar lawyers that definitely exist, we should insist that you don't use electronic equipment in the bath when you drop it, and bad things could happen. So yeah, this is a disclaimer.
What typifies? Like, I don't really understand.
What is there to
what is different about being in the bath than lying on your sofa or in your bed?
What the hell kind of sofa do you have, Alex? That you don't know what the difference is.
Do you not have a wet sofa? I have a very wet sofa.
It consists of 3/4 of its volume will kill you if you sink into it. It's just it's a nice warm bath, and
well, for the time being.
yeah,
It has to. Okay. Now we're narrowing in. So it has to be a fairly short game because you're going to get cold and wrinkly.
No. How? What are you?
I never
What are
take
you
baths.
saying to
I don't
me?
really know
Alex,
what
are you
they're
saying
about.
to me? There's a tap by your feet, and one of them makes hot things happen. So when things get a bit chilly, what? Just go and get more from the
Well,
source.
you just rely on the overflow, do you?
Oh yeah. Or you just do a quick plug pull, let it go down, top up with hot water, get on your next level of get on the next level of Lair of Clockwork God on your Switch, and just sort of baste yourself to sort of slow cook your muscles as you're enjoying the adventuring on the screen. It's lovely.
You are definitely selling this new Patreon tier.
It's good.
You're selling it hard.
It's real good. It's real good. And yeah, you'll go a bit wrinkly, but no harm in that. Unless you're playing Ikaruga, in which case all the skin will fall off your thumbs. So yeah, there are dangers. There are dangers, as our lawyers have told us. Be careful out there. Alex, you really not. That's why we had a bath, Alex.
I hate baths. I hate it. I hate them because it's just kind of so much effort. I like to just walk into a shower.
That's
the biz.
Can't play a game in the shower though.
They're not made. None of this is made for playing games. For God's sakes, we've got a good question actually coming up. That is about context for playing games.
All right, let's do it. Yeah.
I'll expand on my thoughts in this area. But before then, David writes, I was recently playing the beautiful Tuck, the Desolation, which doesn't sound very beautiful, but it is a squad-based roguelike, which is still in early access. And I found myself losing focus due to the absence of a clock. Your main character, the titular Tuck, is afflicted with a mutation and wanders a horrible wasteland in search of a cure. It really doesn't sound very beautiful. When I first got into it, I thought this would mean having a doom clock or having a hard limit to how long a run could last, like in Flotilla. Without that sense of urgency, exploring the map felt more like mopping up than a desperate search for a cure. Darkest Dungeon made me feel a similar way, a core game that I really like, but one that is weakened by a lack of sense of urgency. Even though I like the mechanics, theme, and the aesthetics of Darkest Dungeon, I've never been able to bring myself to get through the grind and finish it. Having something to push me along, whether it's Spelunky Ghost or FTL's Rebel Fleet, is usually a welcome addition for me. How do you feel about Doom Clocks? What games do you feel have done them right? Take care, David.
I hate them. I hate Doom Clocks. I
feel the stress.
Yeah, I feel very stressed. It's not just Doom Clocks, it's anything which puts any kind of time pressure on me. I mean, maybe you would call all of them Doom Clocks, but like, for example, 3D platformers in the 90s would always have a fucking underwater world in which you would drown if you were underwater for too long. Oh, so deeply stressful and not at all a fun challenge or death to avoid. And like Flotilla is a good example, I think, because I always felt, I mean, maybe this is the point, but I always felt robbed by your inevitable demise in that game. Like, if I managed to survive a series of fights and have interesting encounters, because in between the fights you're having these sort of storybook little bits and snippets of narrative in which you get to make choices and decisions, I always felt robbed of the consequences of those decisions. Like, something interesting would happen and I would make what I thought was an interesting, I'm dead. Because I was just, that was it. I didn't feel like an interesting end to my story. It didn't feel like it had driven me to make interesting choices along the way that I wouldn't have made otherwise. It just felt like it was stopping the interesting choices having any kind of payoff. And I don't want that pressure, and I want to see the effects of my actions.
Yeah, I feel the same, but I do, especially in roguelikes, when you read other roguelike players write about it, they seem to play at a far higher level than I'll ever attain, and they seem to need that pressure. Maybe a little like David, the writer of the email, And that's something that I've always felt a little bit uncomfortable with in all these games. They seem to be designed for the top level players, and I'm down the bottom feeling stressed out.
I find this interesting to think about the Spelunky Ghost, for example, because without the Spelunky Ghost, you could meticulously go through the entire environment, get every gem, whip everything, get all the gold, get a big kind of kill count going, and then just leave the level. But why should that be an invalid way of playing if you like that kind of pace of the game? Sometimes like doom clocks are a very, very aggressive move from a game developer to actually control your experience and force you to hurry up because they think that would be more fun for you. But people with different sensitivities might be put off by that. I don't know whether it should be a toggleable option almost.
See, Spelunky is the exception for me. I like the ghost, and I guess I never really thought about it as being a doom clock, even though it so obviously is. But I think the problem in Spelunky is that if players go slow, like everything in that game is really dangerous, and so the danger of everything incentivizes you to go slow and be careful. But if you push the player into going too far down that route, it does stop being as fun for them. And even if they do well, it encourages them to invest too much in a particular run too early in the game. Because what you'll do is you'll go incredibly slowly through 3 levels, get a bunch of money, feel like you've spent a lot of time, but you haven't actually progressed that far in terms of the linear length of the game, and then you'll die anyway because you'll make a mistake, you'll fuck up, and you're eaten by a pitcher plant or whatever. And your death will be more frustrating for the fact that these first 3 levels that ought to have taken you 5 to 7 minutes in total to get through, you instead spend 20 minutes on or 25 minutes on. And it would shape that experience in a way that I think would be detrimental to it. But I don't think that's true in turn-based games. Like, I don't think that's true in Darkest Dungeon or Flotilla. Like, I feel like you can those games you can take as long as you want, whether there's a doom clock or not. All a doom clock would do would make me overthink every single individual decision to try and min-max it before I take the choice that's going to move the clock forward.
This is, I find this really fascinating with regards to the XCOM series, the Fire Access XCOM series, from 1 to 2, where they put hurry-up mechanics, not quite doom clocks, but stuff where there would be objectives that would expire within a certain number of turns in missions that was designed to undermine a way that the top-level players of XCOM Enemy Unknown would traditionally play the game, which was to just meticulously move 2 squares forwards at a time, make sure that everyone is in fully optimal cover, which resulted in very low level of risk-taking. And risk-taking so key to the drama of the combat encounters in XCOM that they felt, Fire Access, I think, felt that they had to put in those hurry-up mechanics, like you have to get to this crate within 3 turns or it will dissolve, or you have to rescue these civilians while they're being attacked by chrysalids and that kind of stuff. And then even on the kind of strategic layer, they put in an enormous sort of stage-by-stage doom clock in XCOM 2. I think the problem with that was that it wasn't apparent like what it meant when it ticked up.
Yeah.
And it wasn't apparent, like it sort of implied that the game would end, but it wasn't that clear. And also it wouldn't tell you, what it meant to go 2 steps ahead on the doom clock. It's board game logic. It's like a board game mechanic, isn't it? Where you tick up between every turn you take. But the board games have like a rule book that you read, and it'll say, when this happens, then you'll have to pay a certain amount. Though increasingly, like I love the new versions of Risk that have little envelopes that you open and stuff like that, which play with it. But in this context, like an XCOM campaign is so long. You have to put so many hours into it that to be surprised or have your efforts undermined because you misunderstood the doom clock is a bad experience.
See, I loved XCOM Enemy Unknown. It's one of my favorite games, probably. And I hated XCOM 2. I just didn't get on with it at all. And doom clocks are part of the reason why. And even on like the smaller scale of like oh, there is a chest, and if you don't get to it within 3 turns, it's going to expire. I understand in theory why that works and why it works for other people, but to me, it's just like, oh, I'm never going to go for that chest then, because the feeling of investing a bunch of decisions and actions and risk in going and getting that chest, and then having it like fucking vanish just before I get to it, is such a hard failure state, even in that context. And I'm just like, oh, that feels utterly garbage. Like, the consequence of it is like, there's no interesting consequence to it. I just didn't do the thing. I took a bunch of risks in the process, maybe screwed myself in the long term if I got some guy killed or injured. But I'm just not going to try. That's
it's
my
kind
motto.
of a situation that the game is kind of like the game is sort of forced you into this situation, was just horrible.
I mean,
I don't deserve this.
And maybe, as Tom said, these were mechanics designed for high-level players that had kind of mastered enemy unknown, and I was never that good at enemy unknown. And so I'm not that person. I don't need those extra things. The stresses that those mechanics are designed to introduce, I already feel, because I'm not that good at it.
Yeah. I loved XCOM 2 because it was exactly the sort of like high intensity strategy experience that I wanted from. It was almost like a survivalist scenario. I felt that like the story of what you were doing in the game was enmeshed well with the mechanics, but there are definitely loads of problems with it, particularly with like those expiring boxes. So what if you get 3 Illyrium? What does that mean? You don't know for a long, long time, because Illyrium is like something that you need high in the tech tree. So I think there's just kind of lack of communication. If you knew that, Illyrium, once you know the game, it's like, I don't need that, so I could just discard that and just keep my characters safe. But you can't just intuit that because it's a nonsense word that they've made up for a type of element that might help you in the future, perhaps, but you don't know how. And I find this with like loads of 4X games as well, where they keep on adding resources, loads of different types of resources, but they're so terrible at communicating what they do to a new player unless you play for 10 hours. I don't know how you solve that. I think like we've been having like interesting chats recently about like simplified strategy games that just kind of take a lot of that out and just give you decisions and take a lot of kind of plus minus number crunching economy stuff away to an extent, and just say like, do you want to go here or here? This will give you this will give you that, and it's very apparent. I don't know, spitballing.
Yeah.
I still like XCOM 2.
Yeah, I mean,
problem though.
I could talk about this all day because, I mean, that was my other problem with the Geoscape and XCOM 2 was just I don't know how to make good decisions here because I don't understand, you know, by what metrics I'm being judged or what's important or what's not, what I can ignore right now. Like, and so it just became overwhelming. And I think more broadly, this is why Sid Meier's Civilization is still the biggest 4X game, is because it's historically set, and you instinctively know the horses are better than feet, and so I'll get the horses. You know, I know why stone is important. I know why, that sort of stuff, rather than Ethereum or whatever you code it for XCOM 2.
I probably said it wrong. I have no idea, which is, proves the point, really, doesn't it? Like everyone knows what food is for, and also like Civ was kind of interlinks with RTS games. Like play Age of Empires, you need food because your soldiers have to eat, and wood is good, but stone is better. And like these things are just obviously the concepts are just speak for themselves. So maybe it's a science fiction setting that kind of hurts that a little bit. But yeah, even though I love Amplitude strategy games as well, I think that their 4X games have so many brilliant new ideas, but their resource system is just like absolute nonsense to a newcomer. Like, what the fuck is dust? And you learn that dust it animates the corpses of warriors for one particular faction, but also it builds stuff for another different faction. And those games, once you've actually kind of decoded them, they're brilliant because all the factions are so different. They behave so differently that you can actually just play game after game after game and get a different experience out of it. But again, it's that $50 entry fee you have to pay. And I think, you know, like you do have to kind of just try, fail, experiment, see what the skill trees are like, or just go onto wikis and just get that information from the internet. So yeah, I don't know. I think that's a weakness of the genre. I think it's definitely a reason why people would be put off from ever playing a 4X game if they kind of like felt tempted to. Maybe I'll try a strategy game. So if you were to roll a dice, throw a dart, and hit one strategy game in the PC gaming library on Steam, what odds do you think there are on it completely alienating you from the entire genre? I think they're high. Think they're high.
Thank you for that question, David. We've got another David. This one is in California. David writes, Dear Cauliflower and Calla Lily, this last weekend I discovered that I did enjoy playing games more after having toiled in the yard for most of the day. What surprised me is that I suddenly had the motivation to start a new game, Dragon Quest XI. It's been installed for months, but the prospect of a long JRPG kept me returning to more familiar fare. I won't armchair psychologize myself as to why this is the case, as I'd much rather hear whether any of you have go-to pre-game activities that make games all the more enjoyable. Thanks for the pods, David in California. Yeah, I was I do find playing a game after doing, and it kind of, I was about to say work, but it has to be sort of somewhat physical, like in the garden or housework or something. I do find sitting down to a game after that, I've bloody earned it, and kind of the physical tiredness is a good reminder of the nice kind of I get to properly relax now. So yeah, I'm definitely with David in this, and I think the actual sort of having done exercise also tends to unravel my mind a little bit and just sort of let me relax a little bit more. Than I suppose there's endorphins going on as well, but yeah, it helps me play games because it's sort of usual distracted sense that I'm in. I've kind of talked about it, I think before. I work all day. I suppose it's the same for a lot of people right now, but I work at a desk and it has my computer at it, and if I want to play a PC game, I got to be happy with spending a whole day working and then continuing to sit there playing a game. So doing something totally different beforehand is like a proper tonic.
Yep, I've been trying to hit the exercise bike recently regularly, just so I don't turn into like a total potato before lockdown ends. And after doing that, you're right, it does clear your mind. Like actually focusing on being in pain as you're doing the exercise is somewhat purifying. And after that, actually, that's what I love to do by crosswords. I like go to the New York Times Mini, and I'll do the main one for the day while I'm lying on my bed and have the fan on. That's lovely. That's really nice. Don't know why.
Good routine.
It's a good routine.
I don't have a routine. Maybe I should get one. Maybe I would play more games if I had like a priming activity beforehand. Because as it is at the moment, I do work all day, and then when the evening comes around, I sit and look at the list of games I could play.
Yeah.
And oftentimes never quite get around to starting any of them, which is not ideal.
Yes.
Not ideal.
Yeah. Well, I've been terribly vulnerable to impulse buys in the January sales. So I now own all of the Mortal Kombat 11 characters, including RoboCop, Rambo, Spawn, Terminator 2000 or whatever the fuck. So my sort of like total switch off podcast experience at the moment, put a podcast on, No Time Daily on, whatever, listen to the harrowing news while learning how to fuck people up as RoboCop in the tutorials, and then once I'm finished with him, on to Spawn. That is a part of my before bed routine at the moment. I'm dissolving as a human being. I'm just dissolving. I'm just turning into a puddle. How much longer? Where's the light? Where's that light at the end of the tunnel?
Thank you to David for that question. I've got one from someone called Caleb, who writes, Dear Crepes and Grapes, greetings from Texas. I've had a question for a bit now, and I knew you could all assist with an answer. The question that he asks is this: is there a downside to releasing a fully completed game via early access instead of a game still in development? You can take early access feedback for bugs and quality of life improvements while still benefiting from having 2 releases. This thought came to me due to the overwhelming release of Valheim, which to me seems like a fully completed game. Personally, I don't see much of a downside to this, as building hype and the initial release of a game seem to be the biggest points to hit. Anyways, thanks for your time for reading this and putting together the podcast. Always a delight to listen to. Much love, Caleb. Here's a good point. Is there a downside? I suppose there are certain expectations of early access games. Like people do expect continual additions and development and improvements.
I think Slayer the Spire, for example, they probably could have released that out of the gate. But to do so, they'd probably have to have charged less for it. And also, if people are charging people for early access games that are in development, they'd also have to charge less for that. So that's a potential downside. But I think if you've got a really good idea and you can get that second wave of media coverage, why wouldn't you? What do you guys think?
Early access definitely doesn't have the stigma attached to it, as far as I can see from here. I don't know. There was a stigma to start with somewhat, but it seems to be normalized now. Is that right?
Yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Me anecdotally. Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, I don't think, like, we used to separate out our early access reviews on Rock Paper Shotgun from normal reviews, and now we don't, basically, because when I think when people are making that purchase decision, it's just a purchasing decision. They're not thinking about it on those terms, really, or not seeing it as a radically different type of purchasing decision, at least. But I follow along with like industry commentators, people who are constantly trying to look at numbers around Steam. There's uncertainty, basically, about, although you do get another bump when your game leaves early access and hits 1.0, it's not clear that those 2 launches are actually 2 launches, that you don't just get one launch and then a second bump, which maybe those 2 bumps you would have just had one equally large launch if you combined it into a 1.0 release. Because there are still, although there's not a stigma around early access, there are still people who look at an early access game and go, yeah, I'm not going to buy it yet. I'm going to wait until it hits 1.0. So maybe the people who buy it when it does hit 1.0 would have bought it if you just said it was 1.0 in the first place.
Yeah.
You know, if it was just
speaking personally, it also like really depends on the genre. So I've no interest at all in buying Baldur's Gate 3 in early access, because I want the complete RPG storytelling experience, narrative experience that Larian wants to make in its total form, the form they're completely happy with. Whereas, like, I had an amazing time playing Hades in early access and seeing them just kind of add to that combat system bit by bit. So I wonder if that's a factor for
the type of game.
Yeah,
because I didn't begrudge Larian for the kind of the big changes that happened to Divinity 2 after launch. Divinity 2? Hang on, I've gone completely blank. The RPG before Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah. Original Sin. Original Sin 2.
Yes, that's right. Like I didn't begrudge them, but I definitely didn't like the way that that saves would be broken way after release, you know, and as comes the game was improved. Like, I was never angry about it, but it's like I would rather this not to have happened. So I've had no compulsion to play Baldur's Gate 3 until it's sort of finished.
Again, it's that time investment thing, isn't it? It's like, I don't want to be a guinea pig for 100 hours. I'm happy to be a guinea pig for 10 minutes in a Hades run, and then sort of like see it develop and enjoy how it improves over time. And Hades was already very good when they actually put it into early access as well. Like, it was immediately fun. And they made it quite clear. The gaps in the game were quite clear based on just like the hub area, the kind of bits that doors that were locked that you knew that were going to be opened later as they sort of developed them. So the format of the game, the genre of the game also seems important to me.
I think it's quite an interesting point that Caleb makes, that kind of, brings up, which is the concept of would anybody ever feel shortchanged if a game was released in early access, which was in fact totally finished? Like, it was perfect. There was nothing much to do on it. And that the developers then sort of concocted a charade of kind of improving it over a year in order to, benefit from this kind of free period of kind of testing and then this sort of, whether it works or not, this double launch thing. I think that people like the idea of an early access game, which is very complete and very solid, obviously. But do you think anyone would ever feel shortchanged by something not technically being early access because it's done?
I think they wouldn't feel shortchanged, but you're probably selling something at perhaps 20 quid when it could be 50 quid per sale. I'm not sure. I wonder, I think we'd have to talk to devs about this, to be honest. It's a really interesting question. It is a really interesting question.
Our final question in this pod is from Jan, aka Dr. Hackenstein. Dear Crate and Crowbar, I'm an indie game dev with a small Discord community, and I recently joined your Discord. While I find my own Discord community to be a little bit too quiet, I'm completely overwhelmed with everything that's going on in yours. It's just so fun. That was my interjection. Even after muting all of the channels that I don't care for, it feels like there's too much work to keep up with all the messages. I had this experience with a few other Discords before, so I was wondering how much activity in a Discord community is too much. Are you in Discord communities that overwhelm you? Why? And at what point does having a big community become more curse than blessing? In any case, thanks for the great podcast and keep up the good work. Best regards, Jan, aka Dr. Hackenstein.
Do you know who the true unsung heroes of the internet are? The whole of all of it, moderators.
Moderators.
If you want a community that has rules, a sense of basic decency, that encourages lively discussion within polite parameters. It's not censorship to if someone's being a twat to kick them up or just tell them to shut up. Moderators, the internet's secret weapon.
Hack out all of the stuff to pare down all the posts just to the good ones.
Good friend and current Peacegamer UK editor-in-chief Phil Savage used to play with commenters something fierce on the Peacegamer. We for the longest time we just didn't have moderators, which is awful, and something I greatly regret. But it was something we could never actually secure. But there were particular he would write things that would just turn particular commenters' comments into I love Phil Savage or something like that. That would just automatically happen. So moderators are the key to having a lovely internet community of any size. As these communities exponentially grow, it becomes increasingly hard to actually pass every single statement. So also basically not a style guide. What's the term? Just a code of behavior, as you'd have in any pub or club or anywhere that you went into. If you walk into a room, you walk into a public place, there's always rules that, don't be a dick. It's not even like a dress code. It's just if the rules are clearly laid out and then you break them, then kick to the curb. Yeah. I don't know. Graham, I think you probably have more developed thoughts on this than me.
No, I know. I mean, I think that's about it, really. We moderate the RPS comments, but we try to moderate them not just to remove the dicks, but to try and foster a good conversation. I tend to think of it as if you had a classroom of children, and someone was talking too much, even if they were being polite in what they were saying, you might ask that person to stop talking so that someone else can have a turn, because they're bogarting the conversation, basically. And that's what a moderator does. If you go to a panel discussion at a conference or something like that, the moderator isn't just there to hurl someone out because they're being abusive or rude. They're there to moderate, to get the speakers to speak in moderation in some ways. And so we try to think of it as trying to foster a positive community rather than just trying to eliminate the negative parts of their community. And that means being really proactive. That means we ban a lot of people and we ban them pretty quickly. And a lot of the time we're not banning them because they're assholes. Sometimes we're banning them just because they're quite tedious. Like if they because you get people in the comments that they're like single issue commenters, basically. Like they're just gonna comment on every fucking game that's got secure ROM in it to say, oh, I hate secure ROM, oh, fucking DRM in this game, I'll never give my money to a game that's got secure ROM in it. And they'll just do that on every single post. And after a while, you're like, maybe not every conversation needs to be about secure ROM. Maybe that doesn't need to be the first comment underneath every single article, that then gets like 6 responses and steers part of the conversation away. I think about it as like, what if a reasonable person scrolled down to the comments and read what was being said? Would they want to join in, or would they think, God, this sounds fucking tedious, why would I want to talk to these people and leave? If that's the case, then moderate it. In terms of Discord stuff, I just idle on lots of Discord servers. Other than our private one, I don't really read because there's lots of conversation happening there, and I don't have the time really. But whenever I do dip into the Crate and Crowbar Discord or the Rock Paper Shotgun Discord, they are lovely, and that is thanks to our lovely moderators.
I think there is a sort of moment where they get too big. I don't really understand the appeal of these sort of vast ones that kind of, you can't possibly get involved in any conversations because of the sheer number of people involved at any moment. Yeah. I don't really sort of understand the point of that. I think, you sort of, I'm kind of with the message writer today, because it's like you need to there surely is too big for Discord specifically. Maybe forums kind of they're slower inherently than Discord, because Discord is so easy just to snap out the briefest line.
Yeah,
they're more ephemeral. I mean, you've got to accept that that you're not going to read everything. This is not a kind of a format for reading everything, unless you're on a tiny Discord, which is friends or whatever.
Yeah, I love skimming the. So I really like the film and telly bit of the Crate and Crowbar Discord, and the role models bit of the Discord, which is our kind of miniatures section, and just seeing the pictures, seeing what people are doing, and sort of like giving a little kind of emoji thumbs up here and there without actually very much saying anything, and just sort of really enjoying the buzz of a town square for people who are equally enthusiastic about a cool thing they like. And the hubbub, that sense of noise. It can be overwhelming, but also I think it's just a sign that people are invested in this community and actually kind of enjoying the community space and coming back to that every day and trying to and catching up with each other, which is a wonderful thing. It's just the internet doesn't always have to be awful. And I like to think that the Crate and Crowbar Discord is one of many examples of that. Also, but I would say that, you're right, Alex. I'm sure there's an event horizon when a community gets so large that it becomes, enjoy this new word, everyone, unmoderatable, where there's just simply too much stuff to pass, and you can't. No one's yet written an algorithm that can actually replace a moderator with emotional intelligence.
I think that's all the questions we have time for in this pod. You can hang out with us and our community on our Discord channel, which we've just been talking about. You'll find a link to it on our website, which is at www.crateandcrowbar.com. If you have a question for us for a future episode, send it to us at questions@crateandcrowbar.com, or you can tweet us at Crate and Crowbar. You can also listen to our pod on YouTube. Perhaps you're listening on YouTube right now. That is at YouTube /.com/Crate and Crowbar, or is there a thing before? I think it's just /Crate and Crowbar. Oh, you can probably find it. It's not difficult. The Crate and Crowbar is kindly funded by our Patreon backers. If you'd like to know more about supporting our podcast and its spin-offs, visit patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar. And I think that is the housekeeping complete, and indeed this podcast complete. I've been Alex Wiltshire. And how do I bring you in here?
We can't look at each
Graham
other.
has been Graham. Tom's been Tom.
That's true. I shall remain Graham.
I shall remain Tom. We had a question from Texas earlier, and I wanted to kind of best wishes to everyone in Texas that are having an awful winter at the moment.
Yeah.
And just sending our love, basically.
Indeed. And thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening,
everybody.